Let me ask you a question. When we think about aging, almost everyone imagines the same thing: aching knees, a stiff back, or legs that no longer have the same strength as before. But what if I told you that most people are looking in the wrong place? There is a movement we perform every day that tends to start weakening long before those problems appear. The most curious thing is that almost no one notices when it happens. One day you simply notice that reaching a dish in a high cabinet, putting away a pot, hanging out laundry, or pulling a light box off a shelf no longer feels as natural as it used to. Not because you suddenly aged, but because your body has been sending small signals for a long time that we almost always overlook. Some time ago I spoke with a 69-year-old woman who led a fairly active life. She walked every morning, tended her garden, and had never thought she was losing physical fitness. However, one day, while organizing her kitchen, she tried to place a pot in a cabinet and had to stop halfway through the movement. She felt no intense pain and had not suffered an injury. The only thing she felt was that her arms no longer responded with the same ease. Afterward, she told me something that many people have probably thought at some point: "I don't understand when this happened." And that phrase perfectly sums up how the body changes over the years. It almost never happens overnight. It is a slow, silent, and so gradual a process that many times we only discover it when an everyday task starts to cost us more effort than usual. What is interesting is that today we know much more about this process than we did just a few decades ago. There are thousands of studies on healthy aging, functional strength, and mobility conducted by universities, hospitals, and medical organizations around the world. And although each study analyzes different aspects, practically all of them agree on one very hopeful idea: the body retains an extraordinary capacity to adapt throughout life. Muscles continue to respond to training, the nervous system can relearn movements, and strength can improve even when a person begins to exercise after the age of 60 or 70. In other words, getting older does not mean the body has stopped changing. It means it needs a different kind of stimulus than it needed decades ago. For that reason, today I am not going to show you a complicated routine or exercises designed for athletes. I want to share with you 3 movements that work fundamental capabilities, such as mobility, independence, and strength in older adults, and they were chosen for a very specific reason. Each one helps to recover abilities we constantly use without realizing it, and that influence the way we lift objects, maintain stability, and move safely. What is most interesting is that once you understand why these 3 movements are so important, you begin to look at exercise in a completely different way. And that is precisely why I want to start with the first one, because it is one of the most underestimated and, at the same time, one of the most useful for keeping a strong and functional body as the years go by. First movement, military press, an essential movement for glenohumeral stability. If I had to choose one movement that most people underestimate, it would probably be this one. When someone hears about raising their arms above their head, they usually think immediately of an exercise to strengthen the shoulders or arms. However, that is only a small part of the story. In reality, this movement is present in dozens of activities we perform without realizing it. Putting a pot in the cabinet, placing a box on a shelf, changing a light bulb, lifting a suitcase into the overhead compartment of a plane, arranging seasonal decorations, or simply reaching for a dish in the kitchen all depend on a combination of strength, mobility, and coordination that the body needs to preserve throughout life. The curious thing is that this capability almost never disappears overnight. It is a silent change. At first you only notice that some movements require a little more effort. Then you start using both hands to do tasks you used to manage with one. Later you stop using the highest shelves because you prefer to avoid the discomfort. Without realizing it, you begin to limit those movements and the body interprets that they are no longer important. As happens with any skill we stop practicing, little by little it starts to lose efficiency. In many women over 60, this change tends to become evident sooner than they imagine. It does not mean they have lost the capacity to get stronger. What happens is that, as the years go by, the muscles of the upper body receive fewer specific stimuli. Many people continue walking, maintain an active life, and carry out their usual activities, but they rarely make pushing or lifting movements above the shoulders in a controlled way. That gradual decrease in use ends up being reflected in tasks as simple as putting away groceries, hanging out laundry, cooking for a good while, or reaching an object in a cupboard. That is precisely why this movement has been studied for so many years. Researchers at the American College of Sports Medicine, together with specialists dedicated to healthy aging, have repeatedly observed that maintaining upper body strength is associated with a greater ability to carry out daily activities, preserve good posture, and maintain independence for longer. Most interestingly, those studies also show something very encouraging: muscle continues to respond to training even when a person begins after the age of 60. The body does not stop adapting because it gets older, it stops adapting when it stops receiving the stimulus it needs. And that is exactly why this exercise occupies first place in our routine. To perform it, you do not need professional weights or expensive equipment. 2 water bottles are more than enough to start. Sit in a firm chair or remain standing if you feel stable. Place a bottle in each hand and bring your elbows approximately to shoulder height, with your palms facing forward. From that position, slowly raise both bottles above your head as far as your mobility allows. Do not try to go higher than necessary. What matters is not to impress with the range of motion, but to move with control and without pain. Then lower slowly, maintaining the same smoothness with which you rose. While performing the movement, try to exhale as you raise the bottles and inhale as you return to the starting position. It may seem like a small detail, but proper breathing helps maintain the rhythm of the exercise and prevents you from accumulating unnecessary tension in the neck and shoulders. If raising both arms at the same time is still complicated, there is a very simple way to adapt it. Raise one arm first and then the other. That small modification reduces the load, improves control, and allows the body to gain confidence before increasing the difficulty. There is no advantage in rushing. Real progress occurs when the movement feels increasingly stable and natural. It is also worth paying attention to one of the most common mistakes. Many people arch their back to get the bottles to go higher. When that happens, the shoulders stop doing the main work and the lower back begins to compensate for the effort. If you notice your back leaning backward, simply reduce the range of motion or use less weight. A short, well-executed movement will always be preferable to a wide one performed with poor technique. If you practice this exercise consistently, the first changes you notice will probably not be in front of a mirror but in your daily life. You will discover that putting groceries in the pantry becomes more comfortable, that reaching an object in a high cabinet stops being a nuisance, and that keeping your arms raised while cooking or doing household chores requires less effort. These are small changes that many people overlook, but together they make an enormous difference in the way we live. And perhaps that is the most valuable aspect of this movement. Each repetition is a reminder to your body that it still needs that capability. You are not lifting a simple water bottle. You are training the ability to continue doing by yourself the activities that are part of your routine and the moments you enjoy most. Because real strength does not consist of lifting heavy weights in a gym. Real strength is being able to keep living with confidence, autonomy, and the freedom to do the things that make each day worthwhile. Second movement, push ups, important for the stability of the scapulohumeral complex. When most people hear the word push-ups, they immediately think of an exercise reserved for young people or for those who spend hours training in a gym. It is such a common idea that many people do not even consider trying it. However, that perception is far from reality. Push-ups are not only a strength exercise. They are one of the most complete functional movements the body can perform because they reproduce an action we constantly make in daily life: pushing. We push when we open a heavy door, when we get up from the sofa using our hands, when we move a chair, when we lift our body from bed, or even when we need to stabilize ourselves to avoid a fall. These are such habitual movements that we rarely think about them, but it only takes a decrease in strength to discover how important they really are. As the years go by, the muscles of the chest, shoulders, arms, and abdomen begin to lose strength if they stop being used in a specific way. Many people continue walking every day, which is an excellent habit, but walking does not demand the same work from the upper body. Little by little, the body stops receiving that stimulus and activities that once seemed normal start to require more effort than expected. In many women over 60, this change usually shows up first in small details. Opening a heavy window, lifting a pot full of water, pushing a shopping cart, or getting up using only the strength of the arms begins to feel different. It does not mean the body has lost the capacity to get stronger. It simply means that those muscles need to work again. Scientific research clearly supports this type of training. For years, specialists in exercise and aging have observed that preserving upper body strength helps maintain independence for carrying out daily activities and promotes better bodily stability. There is even a well-known study that found an association between a greater ability to perform push-ups and better cardiovascular health status in certain populations. Although that study does not mean that doing push-ups alone prevents disease, it does reflect an important reality: maintaining the body's strength is closely related to healthier aging. The good news is that you do not need to start by doing a traditional push-up on the floor. In fact, for many people that will not be the best option at first, and that is perfectly fine. What matters is to respect the level at which your body is today. If you already have enough strength and mobility, you can perform the classic push-up by placing your hands on the floor, keeping your body aligned from head to feet, and descending slowly before pushing back up. There is no need to lower all the way down if it is not yet comfortable for you. A controlled range of motion will always be better than a repetition performed with poor technique. If that version is still too demanding, simply use a wall. Stand at a comfortable distance, place both hands at chest height, and slowly bend your elbows as you bring your body closer. Then push back until you return to the starting position. The movement is exactly the same, the only thing that changes is the amount of weight your arms support. As you gain strength, you can use a more inclined surface, such as a sturdy table or a countertop, before moving to the floor. Throughout the exercise, try to keep your abdomen slightly contracted and avoid letting your back sag. It is also not advisable to open the elbows too wide, as that can create unnecessary tension in the shoulders. Perform each repetition calmly, focusing more on the quality of the movement than on quantity. A few well-done repetitions are enough to start. As the weeks go by, you will discover that pushing a heavy door, getting up from a chair, or moving objects around the house starts to feel easier. Those changes usually appear long before you notice differences in the mirror, because the real benefit of this exercise is not in physical appearance but in the way your body responds to everyday tasks. And that is precisely why push-ups remain one of the most valuable movements for active aging. It does not matter whether today you do them on the floor or leaning against a wall. What matters is that each repetition reminds your body that it still needs the strength to push, support, and respond safely whenever daily life calls for it. Third movement, squats, an essential movement for the biomechanics of the lower body. If there is one movement that represents true functional strength, it is the squat. Although many people associate it with the gym or with sports training, the reality is very different. We do it every day without realizing it. Every time you sit down in a chair and stand back up, when you pick something up off the floor, when you bend down to reach an object, or when you get in and out of a car, your body is performing a variation of this movement. That is precisely why, when the legs begin to lose strength, the squat becomes one of the most important exercises for preserving independence. What is interesting is that this loss of strength almost never appears overnight. It begins in a very silent way. First, you notice that going upstairs requires a little more effort. Then you discover that you need to push with your hands to get up from the sofa or from a chair. Later, you start to avoid bending down because you feel insecure or afraid of losing your balance. Many people believe that all of this happens simply because they are aging, but today we know there is a much more precise explanation. This progressive loss of strength has a name: sarcopenia. It is the gradual decrease in muscle mass and strength that tends to appear with the passing of the years. Although it is part of aging, that does not mean it is an inevitable destiny. The real problem is that many people do not notice its effects until tasks as simple as getting up from a chair, walking several blocks, or climbing a few steps start to feel much harder than they used to. Moreover, sarcopenia does not only reduce strength. It can also affect balance, stability, and increase the risk of falls, something specialists consider one of the main threats to maintaining autonomy in adulthood. In many women over 60, this process can become especially evident because the legs are the foundation of practically all daily movements. They are the ones that support the body when walking, climbing stairs, going shopping, cooking for long periods, or simply staying on one's feet while carrying out household tasks. For that reason, physiotherapists and specialists in healthy aging consider that strengthening the legs is one of the best investments we can make to preserve a good quality of life. The scientific evidence clearly supports this approach. Over the last few decades, numerous studies have shown that strength training is one of the most effective tools for slowing the progression of sarcopenia and even recovering part of the lost strength, even when a person begins exercising after the age of 60 or even 70. Most interestingly, it is not necessary to lift heavy weights to obtain benefits. Simple exercises, performed with good technique and consistently, are sufficient to stimulate the muscles again and help the body preserve the ability to move safely. The best part of the squat is that it can be adapted to each person's level. If you already have good stability and sufficient strength, you can perform a traditional squat. Place your feet approximately shoulder width apart, Shift your hips slightly back as if you were going to sit down, and descend slowly while keeping your chest upright. Then rise again by pushing the floor with your feet. There is no need to go lower than is comfortable. What matters is that the movement is controlled and that you can perform it without pain. If you do not yet feel confident doing a free squat, there is an excellent adaptation using a chair. Simply sit down and stand back up slowly without dropping onto it or pushing too much with your hands. This movement exactly reproduces one of the most important actions of daily life and allows you to strengthen the legs in a very safe way. In fact, many rehabilitation programs use this variation because it improves functional strength without requiring complex movements. Another alternative is to support yourself against a wall, on the back of a sturdy chair, or on a kitchen countertop while performing the squat. That additional support provides greater stability and helps build confidence while you learn the technique. Over time, as your legs get stronger, you will be able to rely on that support less and less. During the exercise, make sure your knees follow the direction of your feet and avoid descending too quickly. Some people think that a deeper squat is always better, but that is not true. It is far more beneficial to perform a comfortable, well-controlled movement with good technique than to try to go lower than necessary at the expense of stability. As the weeks go by, you will start to notice changes where they really matter. Getting up from the sofa will be easier. Climbing stairs will require less effort. Walking for longer will feel more comfortable, and you will feel greater confidence when moving inside and outside your home. These are improvements that may seem small, but when added together they can transform the way you enjoy your daily life. And that is the real reason this exercise is part of this routine. Each squat, whether performed in the traditional way, using a chair, or with the support of a wall, reminds your body that the legs are still the foundation of your independence. You are not training just to strengthen muscles. You are training to keep getting up safely, walking with confidence, and preserving the freedom to do by yourself those small things that, in the end, are the ones that matter most. To close our routine, there is something very important you must understand. Before finishing, I want you to take away one idea that is perhaps the most important in this entire video. These three movements were not chosen by chance. Each one works a different function of the body, and, when you practice them consistently, they complement each other to help you preserve something that is worth far more than strong muscles: your independence. The first movement, the military press with water bottles, strengthens mainly the shoulders, the arms, and much of the musculature that stabilizes the upper body. These are muscles you use every day to lift objects, put away groceries, place a pot in a cabinet, comb your hair, change a light bulb, or simply reach for something above your head. As the years go by, if we stop performing these kinds of movements, that strength begins to diminish little by little. Maintaining it means that tasks as normal as cooking, tidying the house, or traveling will remain much easier and safer. The second movement, push-ups, works the chest, shoulders, arms, and abdomen. But beyond the muscles, it strengthens a fundamental movement pattern: the ability to push. We push when we open a heavy door, when we get up from the sofa, when we need to rise from bed, or when we look for support to regain our balance. If today you can do them on the floor, excellent. And if that is not yet possible, doing them against a wall also offers great benefits. What has never mattered is the difficulty of the exercise, but the consistency with which you practice it. Finally, there are squats, probably the most important movement for keeping strong legs. This exercise strengthens the quadriceps, the glutes, and other muscles that are involved every time you walk, climb stairs, get up from a chair, or maintain your balance. They also help to combat sarcopenia, that progressive loss of muscle mass and strength that tends to appear with age and can gradually limit our mobility if we do nothing to prevent it. The best thing of all is that there are different adaptations. You can do a traditional squat, use a chair to sit and stand, or lean against a wall if you still need a little more stability. What matters is to keep moving. When you combine these three exercises, you are working practically the most important functions the body needs to get around safely in daily life. You are strengthening the ability to lift, push, walk, get up, maintain balance, and carry out many of the activities that allow you to remain independent. And that is worth far more than any aesthetic goal. Remember that the body responds to what we do repeatedly. If we spend most of the day sitting, the body understands that it no longer needs to preserve all its strength. But if we give it a few minutes of movement each day, little by little it will adapt again. Never underestimate what a few minutes of exercise done with good technique and consistently can achieve. And before I say goodbye, let me tell you something with a smile. Do not be like my grandmother, who can spend 8 hours sitting watching television, and every time I tell her we should do a little exercise she responds, "I'll start tomorrow." We all know that tomorrow almost never comes. Do not wait for your body to force you to move. Start today, even if it is with just a few repetitions. Your future self, the one who wants to keep walking safely, playing with grandchildren, traveling, cooking, and enjoying life, will surely thank you. If this video helped you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss the upcoming exercises and tips we will share every week to help you maintain a strong, active, and independent body. And now I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what is the activity you find most difficult to do in your daily life. Getting up from a chair? Climbing stairs? Reaching objects in high places? Or walking for several minutes without getting tired? I will love reading your answers, because they also help me prepare the next videos with what you really need. Thank you for joining me until the end. Take care of your body, keep moving, and remember that independence is built with the small decisions we make each day. See you in the next video?